Matt Schaff and Jared Small of DraftSharks.com here, and it's been a fun week to follow the NFL with a couple of big name wide receiver trades. But now, Jared, it's time to hit the start-sit questions, look at Week 7 as opposed to the longer term with these guys, and also talk through some other key situations that are going to affect our lineups this week. Let's start, though, with that number one big trade, Davante Adams to the Jets. And we talked Tuesday about our rest of season expectations for Adams, Garrett Wilson, and the rest of that offense. You can check out that show if you want to get into those specifics. So the question is, with the Jets at the Steelers on Sunday night, how are you projecting Davante Adams and Garrett Wilson for Week 7?
I think the easy answer as far as start-sit goes is most teams are going to be starting both of these guys. Adams and Wilson sit inside our top 24 wide receivers for the week. And I think, in relation to each other, they're pretty close to how we view them rest of the season. We have Wilson ranked above Adams, which sounds to me like it's not the consensus, but we do have him close. Adams was a full go in Wednesday's practice. So obviously, if there was a hamstring injury, it's not a concern anymore. We're going to talk about Amari Cooper as he transitions to the Bills. But, with Adams, I think it's going to be a much smoother transition than most of these wide receivers that change teams in season because of, his relationship with Aaron Rodgers. And I know Nathaniel Hackett's not the OC anymore, but I got to imagine, the offense is still a lot of the same stuff that, Adams did when he was with the Packers. So, the issue here is the matchup against Pittsburgh. In Pittsburgh, like you said, Matt, the Jets are only implied for 20 points. The Steelers are fourth in our adjusted fantasy points allowed to wide receivers. We'll see what the Steelers do with Joey Porter Jr. in this game, who to me has become one of the top 5 cover corners in the NFL. I don't know if he'll shadow one of these guys, if he'll spend time on both guys, but it's a tough matchup. Wilson and Adams are a bit lower than they will be in most weeks in our weekly rankings.
Now, you mentioned Nathaniel Hackett. Todd Downing is the one calling the plays now. He has not coached Davante Adams before, so it's going to be kind of interesting this week to see, I guess, just how much of it is Aaron Rodgers controlled. I think everybody kind of treats it like it's Aaron Rodgers controlled at this point, and obviously he's going to have lots of input into it, but we'll see just how much. We'll start to see. We're not going to get a full picture of anything this week, but I think we'll start to see just how much is Aaron Rodgers driven and how much is coached to him. We'll see how much the pass connection between Aaron Rodgers and Davante Adams means for his immediate role. And I mean, even though they have plenty of history together, it has been a couple of years since they played together. I think that's got to be worth something, at least in terms of the first week risk with Adams. I think we also need to treat it like there was a hamstring injury just for the sake of factoring in a bit of risk with Adams on that. Again, it's just like a minor thing to kind of factor in, maybe a tiebreaker if you have Adams even with somebody else. I think really the thing that we all have to remember is that none of us knows what's going to happen here. Like if Davante Adams goes out Sunday night and gets 10 targets or gets 3 targets, I don't think either of those outcomes is going to be shocking.
And we should know that Adams is on the injury report with a hamstring. Now, if that's the Jets covering for Adams or for the Raiders or whatever, who knows? But he was a full practice participant on Wednesday. So I'm not expecting that to limit his snaps. My concern for this game and Wilson, Adams, and Aaron Rodgers is just a good Steelers defense on the road. I don't think it's going to be a ceiling game for this Jets offense.
Yeah, it's also worth noting that Aaron Rodgers has not been awesome this year. He's had some good spots. He had that particularly good game against the Patriots, but overall he's been kind of okay. So it's quite possible that even if this offense is fine going forward, they don't have an awesome Week 7 against Pittsburgh. On the same day that Davante Adams became a Jet, the Bills acquired Amari Cooper from the Browns. Davante Adams sits at wide receiver 22 in our PPR rankings for this week at the moment, Jared. Amari Cooper sits at wide receiver 59. Why is that?
Yeah, well, Cooper's joining a brand new offense with a brand new quarterback that he has no experience with. Both head coach Sean McDermott and GM Brandon Beane on Wednesday said they weren't even sure if Cooper's going to play this weekend. This might be a non-decision for owners of Cooper. If I do own Cooper, I'd not want to start him this week. I know some teams might need to. If he plays, I would expect him to have limited snaps. How limited, we'll see. Hopefully, we get one of those updates on Sunday morning about Buffalo's plans for Cooper. Beyond that, though, the Bills are big home favorites against Tennessee. This has already been a run-leading offense. I do eventually expect them to throw a bit more now that they've added, a legit number one receiver in Cooper, but I don't think it's going to start this week against this Titans defense. And Tennessee is second in adjusted fantasy points allowed to wide receivers. That's one thing the Titans have done well this year, is limit opposing fantasy production at the wide receiver spot. So it's just not a good spot for Amari Cooper. Again, if I could help it, I would not be starting him this week.
I would lean conservative on Cooper as well. We'll certainly be watching all the way up until game time on Sunday. And let's hope that that helps us sort things out on what we can expect here. I probably wouldn't have Cooper quite as low if I'm making the decision there. Like once I get into the 40s where we're looking at guys like Michael Wilson, Tyler Lockett, Josh Downs, and certainly Xavier Leggett, I would have a real hard time not playing Amari Cooper over those guys unless I specifically know heading into the game that he's barely going to play. I expect that he would play less than what his normal playing time will end up being, but I would also expect that when Cooper is out there, he'll have a high target versus route rate, because I don't think there's much benefit to the Bills throwing him out there to run sprints. I think they're going to put him out there to try to get work in with the quarterback. And once he's out there, Josh Allen's going to be like, sweet, I have an actual NFL receiver out here besides Khalil Shakir. I'm going to throw him some balls and see what happens. And if we know anything about Josh Allen, he's all about, I'm going to throw this and see what happens. We saw him throw a 45-yarder to Ray Davis last week. So if Amari Cooper is out there for some kind of role, I think his quarterback will try to get him. And, you know, like we've said, we'll watch until Sunday and see what we can get there. Joe Brady was also non-committal on what, if any, role Amari Cooper is going to have in this game. And the only precedent we have for Amari Cooper switching teams mid-season came back in 2018 when he went from the Raiders to the Cowboys. That trade happened at the beginning of a bye week. So he had all of the bye week and then the week leading up to the ensuing game to get ready for that one. Did lead Cowboys receivers in playing time for that game, but a lot less practice time to get acclimated this time around.
Yeah, I'm definitely with you on the, the high target per route rate for Cooper on Sunday. Could be a case where, the Bills are up by 14 in the second half and they're just like, let's get Amari going a bit. Let's get him a few catches. Yeah, I think that range you mentioned, like the Tyler Lockett, Josh Downs, Xavier Leggett, I'd be starting those guys over Amari Cooper. It's kind of like the next tier down, like Lazard, Calvin Ridley, Quentin Johnston. I'd be fine taking a shot on Cooper over those guys. So more like, wide receiver 50 range for me.
Away from those wide receivers now, and to a running back that's been making plenty of news lately, we've got Tank Bigsby, who really got what his holders would have wanted last week in Travis Etienne leaving with a second injury this season. And yet we didn't get, as a result, the production from Tank Bigsby that we wanted. What did we get from his usage?
The problem for Bigsby last week is the Jags were down by multiple scores for most of that game. And the Jags are just not going to give this guy passing down snaps, right? Travis Etienne goes down and they gave all that work to Dearness Johnson. Dearness Johnson ran 25 pass routes in that game to just 5 for Tank Bigsby. So that's definitely a concern going forward, even if Etienne remains out, because the Jags are not a good football team. They're going to be trailing quite a bit. This week, Bigsby cannot ask for a better spot, and this is assuming Etienne's out, by the way. Etienne was a limited practice participant on Wednesday, so it seems like he has a shot to play. But if Etienne is out, Bigsby, his Jaguars are 5.5-point favorites over New England. The Patriots are 27th in run defense DVOA. They're allowing 5 yards per carry to running back. So again, it's pretty much an ideal spot for Bigsby. The Jags should not fall behind so much in this game if they have to abandon the run. So I do think if Etienne's out, I'd feel good about Bigsby, getting 15 plus carries in this game.
And really, it might even be a fine spot for Bigsby if Etienne is active, especially if you're in a non-PPR or half PPR format. If they do play this one tight, there's even more reason to give the ball to Bigsby and not Etienne if he's nursing this hamstring injury as well as a shoulder in this game. So I think what you're hoping for if you have Tank Bigsby is that he gets you good production this week and then you sell as hard as you can ahead of the following week, because what we're going to get at best is a limited guy. He's going to share snaps with Dearness Johnson, even if Travis Etienne were to go down for the rest of the year. So not saying you would dump Bigsby for whatever you can get, but I'd be selling pretty hard in that scenario.
Yeah, the Jags probably won't be 5.5-point favorites in any other game the rest of the season. And again, it's pretty obvious at this point, Bigsby needs positive game script to really be a reliable fantasy play.
Another backfield that might be shifting is the Cincinnati one. What's going on with Chase Brown versus Zach Moss for the Bengals?
Brown kind of continues to distance himself from Zach Moss. So Brown's actually outcarried Moss in 3 straight games now, and he's been the better runner, the more efficient runner, the more explosive runner in all 3 of those games. He's really just been the better runner all season. Basically any rushing metric you want to look at, yards per carry, rush yards over expected per attempt, yards after contact per attempt. Brown's beating Moss. I don't see any reason for the Bengals to go away from Brown as at least, the lead ball carrier in a committee. The most exciting thing for Brown is that he ran more pass routes than Zack Moss last week for the first time all season. Season high 54% route rate for Chase Brown in that game. So if he's going to be leading in carries and in passing game usage, he's obviously the clear better play in this backfield. I think Brown at that point becomes like a weekly RB2 with RB1 upside because we know the big playability he has.
That's the key. Is we knew that Chase Brown was faster, had more explosive ability here, but Zack Moss was the clear favorite in passing situations previously, like earlier this season. If that is shifting more toward Chase Brown now, then there's room for him to really create some distance between himself and Zack Moss. And this remains a valuable situation. The Bengals running backs rank 14th in PPR points per game for the season, but 9th over the past 3 weeks. They scored 14.1 collective points per game over the first 2 weeks, 27.3 over the past 4 weeks. So they've gotten better after those first 2 games. And that's including a down game versus the Giants this past week. The week 2 game is the only time this season that we did not get a Bengals running back touchdown.
I think, Chase Brown's someone I'd even be going out and looking to acquire still. I think he hasn't had that like blow up week yet where he's probably, unattainable right now. You can still probably, you're gonna have to give up quite a bit, but I think it might be worth it because again, I do think this guy, could be a top 15 fantasy back the rest of the way.
Now that doesn't make Zack Moss a drop, right?
No, I mean, I think he's still playable as an RB3 flex, especially during the bye weeks here. And then, he's still, if you want to consider him a handcuff, even he's a top 5 handcuff in fantasy football because he's going to get all the work in a good offense if Chase Brown goes down.
And while we're talking about him potentially being a handcuff, this is an evolving situation. Like we haven't seen Chase Brown definitely take over the backfield. We've seen hints that it might be happening, but it could be very different when they take the field next. So we'll keep watching that. Both should be on a roster in your league somewhere. And there's enough value in this offense that they both could be standalone fantasy candidates the rest of the way. So both Tank Bigsby and Bengals backfield appear in Jared's usage report this week on draftsharks.com. Check that out for more details on both of those situations, plus plenty of other situations, including the backfield that we're about to address, and that is Arizona's, where, Jared, is James Conner's workload in trouble?
I think what we saw last week is going to end up being more of a blip. So Conner last week set season lows in snap rate, route rate, and carry share. It looked like he had an ankle injury or a leg injury at some point in that game. The TV broadcast showed him on the sidelines trying to sort of like, work it out, keep it loose, whatever. He ended up coming back in the game, but there was definitely something going on there. We haven't got a practice report for the Cardinals yet because they play on Monday night. So we'll get the first one on Thursday afternoon here. But I think that was part of it. And the other part of it was the Cardinals fell behind the Packers by 14 early in the second quarter. They never got to within 1 score in that game. I don't think Conner's lost the lead ball carrying role to Trey Benson. I still think he's that guy. But the issue with Conner and why we had him as a sell in our trade targets article a couple of weeks ago is that he just hasn't had a good role in the passing game all season. He's been losing passing down snaps to Amari Cooper. And when the Cardinals fall behind like they did to Green Bay, Conner's just not going to be on the field as much. So that's a legit concern going forward. If he's healthy, though, I still think he's the leader of this backfield and still someone you can use as a RB2 play in fantasy lineups.
Yeah, we did have Conner as a sell in the week 5 trade targets, as you said. If you didn't sell Conner then or ahead of that week 6 game against Green Bay, you probably have to wait for now. I don't think you're getting a good return at the moment. There is a plus matchup with the Dolphins in week 8, though. So if Conner proves healthy, if he continues leading that backfield, that could be a really nice spot. And if we get a good James Conner game in week 8, maybe you get another sell opportunity. Looking way ahead, the Cardinals' schedule finishes very nicely for running backs. They have the Patriots in week 15, Panthers in week 16, Rams in week 17. Now, you might take that and think, oh, I want to keep James Conner around for that. I think that's a good reason to stash Trey Benson right now, where possible, because these Cardinals are currently 2-4. They're not a realistic playoff contender. I'm sure that they're not giving up on it yet, but I don't think that by week 15, we're going to be talking about the Cardinals contending for the playoffs. That would give them incentive to work Trey Benson more into the game plan if they haven't already by that point, especially when we're getting to the end of what should be James Conner's final season with the Cardinals. So Trey Benson should be a cheap stash in a lot of places right now. It could really pay off late.
Yeah, and is Conner even healthy by the end of the season? That's always an issue with him. him. So I do think Benson is a nice stasher. Now, again, I don't think he's taking over the backfield. I don't think you're going to be able to use him anytime soon, but definitely if Connor goes down, and even if not, potentially at the end of the season, he's their leader.
And by the way, whether you're thinking about this Cardinals backfield or not, as we get further into the season, you're going to want to check that strength of schedule page where you can not only see the matchups for this week and upcoming weeks and past weeks, if you want to see those, you can customize it. So if you want to see like who has the best running back schedule week 15 to week 17, you can pare that down and look at whatever specific window you're trying to check. Because, we not only want to set our lineups for this coming week, we want to get our rosters set for the important stretches of the season and try to take it all the way to that league championship. Josh Jacobs is not in danger of losing his backfield, but he is disappointing us with production so far. Just 21st among running backs in total PPR points, 29th in PPR points per game. Tough matchups with Houston and Detroit among the next 3 games, Jared. Should I be worried about Josh Jacobs right now? Not just this week, but maybe even beyond?
No, I mean, those matchups are tough. That's going to be an issue the next 2 weeks, but 2 reasons he's disappointed so far. One is the lack of touchdowns. That I think is going to change, right? I mean, he's their clear goal line back. This is a top 10 offense. He's going to start scoring touchdowns. The other issue has been sort of a just okay role in the passing game. He's at an 8% target share on the season. It makes sense, right? I mean, the Packers have so many weapons. Like Jacobs can catch the ball. He's a good pass catching back, but he's not going to see a huge target share in that offense. So I don't think that changes, and that probably keeps him out of top 10 running back value. But a couple weeks ago, it looked like this was kind of a 60-40 split between Josh Jacobs and Emmanuel Wilson. But over the last 2 weeks, Jacobs has kind of distanced himself from Emmanuel Wilson. Snaps over that span are 90-38 in favor of Jacobs. Carries are 37-13. So again, if Jacobs can kind of keep that share of the backfield, score some more touchdowns, I think he's going to be fine. I think he might even be somebody you could buy low.
He's got 100% of the team's carries inside the 5-yard line so far, 90% of the team's carries inside the 10. Both of those are top 5 numbers across the league. He only has 1 touchdown in that range. The team simply hasn't run the ball much in that range so far. I think that's going to change. We're talking about an offense that ranks 4th in the league in yards per play, despite losing Jordan Love for 2 of the first 6 games. They've got 29 plus points in 4 of their 6 games so far. They've got 410 plus total yards in 3 of 4 Jordan Love games. So it's just a good offense. And anytime you can have a good running back in a very good offense, that's just going to be a good fantasy asset going forward. We do have Josh Jacobs as one of the 3 buys in our week 7 trade target. So you can check that out. You can see more of the argument for him. You can see the other buys, the 3 sells, the 2 holds, and we'll look back on the picks from the past 2 weeks as well. So lots in there. Whether you're looking at Josh Jacobs, have Josh Jacobs, or interested in other guys. Jared, let's round this out with some quarterback talk. And we talked about it last week. I think it's worth addressing again. No, we talked about it 2 weeks ago because he was on bye last week, but it's worth addressing again now that he's back. Who are you playing ahead of Patrick Mahomes this week? I'm going to start with Brock Purdy, Geno Smith, Baker Mayfield, Jordan Love, because I don't think they're even surprising names over Patrick Mahomes anymore, right?
Yeah, I mean, Geno might be the one that surprises people just because he hasn't been great the last couple of weeks. He still put up fantasy points, though, because he's throwing it like 40, 50 times per game. The Seahawks are the pass-heaviest offense by pass rate, neutral pass rate over expected. They're leading the league and all that stuff. That should be a shootout against the Falcons. So, yeah, I'm definitely starting Geno and those other guys you mentioned over Patrick Mahomes. I'm starting Kirk Cousins on the other side of that game over Patrick Mahomes. It should be a high-scoring game. The Falcons have the 2nd highest implied total of the week at 27 points. I mean, Mahomes, he's going to settle in as a low-end quarterback 1 in our rankings. So unless they acquire something that changes the outlook for this offense, I just, that's just kind of just what he is at this point. And especially this week against the 49ers, I mean, that's just a good defense. The Chiefs are implied for 23 points. That's 16th most on the week. So like right in the middle of the pack. Mahomes just kind of is what he is at this point as a low-end quarterback 1.
Yeah, he's got 1 game so far out of his 5 with more touchdowns than interceptions. So it's not that, he's just been unlucky. He hasn't been that great, at least statistically. 1 300-yard game, just 2 games where he's got 250 plus passing yards. Last year, the numbers got better later in the season when they started playing Rashee Rice more. I'm not sure what they have this year that can do the same thing because Xavier Worthy's already on the field plenty. Doesn't seem like Rashee Rice is going to come back this year. So, it's tough to see where that boost will come from. Mahomes will probably be fine. He'll probably have a better stretch at some point, at least, than what he's had so far. But there's also no reason to believe that he's a top 5 quarterback going forward.
No, definitely not. I mean, Worthy is the thing on the team right now that, like, if they kind of unlock him and maybe, they do coming off the bye week, that's what can sort of elevate this offense. But I definitely need to see it before counting on that happening.
Sam Darnold is another guy who has outscored Patrick Mahomes so far by 2.3 points per game, depending on your scoring format, of course. I like Sam Darnold ahead of Mahomes this week as well against Detroit. And, that matchup should be favorable for passing anyway. But the Lions last time out, of course, lost Aiden Hutchinson, and with him went 50% of the Lions sacks so far this season and 38% of their total pressure. So that matchup got even better for Darnold.
Yeah, I mean, Darnold sits just behind Mahomes in our Week 7 rankings. They're actually tied in 3D value, but, rounding puts Mahomes at. But I could definitely see starting Darnold over Mahomes. Like you said, Matt, I mean, this should be a really good spot for pass volume from the Vikings. Minnesota's already 4th in the league in pass rate over expected per attempt. So, despite losing Kirk Cousins, Kevin O'Connell has not changed this offense. It's still a pass-heavy offense. And the Lions are one of the biggest pass funnel defenses in the NFL. They are 2nd in pass rate over expected against, meaning teams are opting to go very pass-heavy against them because their run defense is so good. This Lions-Vikings game has a 50.5 point over-under. The Vikings have the 4th highest implied total on the week. So it's definitely a good spot for Darnold. My only concern is, I know it was the Jets. That was like a bad Sam Darnold game last time out. And there's a chance that, we get bad Sam Darnold. So I think that the downside is probably a bit lower than Mahomes is, but I think Darnold beats Mahomes on upside this week.
Yeah. Which imagine July us looking ahead and seeing that statement being made in mid-October and it making total sense.
Fantasy football.
Kyler Murray has been up and down so far, QB 14 in points per game on the season, but that QB 14 ranking even, which is, disappointing versus where he was getting drafted, has been boosted by a couple of big fantasy scores, first against the Rams in week 2, then at the 49ers in week 5. And even that score against the 49ers was inflated quite a bit by a 50-yard touchdown run. So what do we think of Kyler Murray this week and I guess going forward too?
Yeah, and Murray can give you 50-yard touchdown runs, but that's the only reason he sits as high as he does in our Week 7 rankings, and he is outside the top 12. He's at quarterback 14. So, we're starting Sam Darnold over Kyler Murray this week. Murray has been, you talked about the nice fantasy game against the 49ers. Otherwise, he's been quarterback 18 or worse in his other 3 games among his last 4. Now, the passing game has just been very disappointing for the Cardinals this season. Murray hasn't topped 214 passing yards or thrown more than 1 passing touchdown in a game outside of that game against the Rams, who are bottom 5 pass defense. I don't think it's all on Kyler Murray either. Play calling, there's some issues there. And the other thing is the Cardinals are 26th in pass rate over expected. So this has been a run-leaning offense. And then this week, making matters worse for Murray is Marvin Harrison is likely going to miss this game with his concussion. He gets an extra day to clear protocol. This is a Monday night game, so maybe he's back. If Harrison ends up playing, maybe Murray moves a spot or 2 up our rankings. But again, it's just kind of been an underwhelming start for this passing game.
And of course, that extra day means that we might have to set our lineups on Sunday, not knowing whether Marvin Harrison Jr. is going to play. So I would assume that Harrison is not going to play. We'll see what we know by then. But if we hit Sunday 1:00 and still don't know if Marvin Harrison Jr. is playing, then I'm going to proceed from there as though he's not. And even with him in the lineup for most of the way so far, like we just talked about, Kyler Murray has not been excellent. He's basically been Justin Fields in terms of how he's producing. So, factor that in. There are all of the guys that we talked about so far, players that I would play over Kyler Murray if you have that choice to make.
Agreed.
The last quarterback we'll talk about is Drake Maye. And, when I was putting together the rundown for this, not somebody that sprang immediately to mind as a player we would need to talk about, but then I saw people actually wondering out loud if they should start Drake Maye in one quarterback formats. To me, that seems a little crazy, but that's why we're going to talk through it. So he got his first start last week. He finished QB 12 in that week, outscored Lamar Jackson, CJ Stroud, Kirk Cousins, Geno Smith, and Kyler Murray. So now in start number 2 against the Jaguars, should Drake Maye be in starter consideration?
I'm not ready to trust him yet as a quarterback 1. He's going to be a guy that's better in fantasy than real life. I think there's issues with him as a real life quarterback at this point, which, he's a rookie. He's a even on the young side for a rookie, just coming off his first start. He did some good stuff in his debut against Houston. He also did some bad stuff. He just missed some easy throws. I think the pocket presence is pretty shoddy right now. He threw 2 interceptions. had a fumble. But again, he threw for 243 yards and 3 touchdowns and ran for 38 yards. Like, he's going to score more fantasy points than it might look like if you just watch these Patriots games. A couple other things on the Patriots. I mean, they were still minus 9% in pass rate over expected last week. So this is still a team that wants to run the ball. They kind of want to protect this rookie quarterback. Maye had to throw a bunch because they fell behind Houston early in that game. So that's an issue. The O-line's still an issue. The pass catching core is still an issue. Like, it's an uphill battle for Drake Maye to score these fantasy points. So again, those are the reasons I would still not trust him in as a quarterback one, but we'll just kind of continue to see how he evolves within this offense.
Yeah, I agree. He ranked 20th in Pro Football Focus passing grade for week 6, which, is fine for your first NFL start. I went back and watched all of his pass attempts in that game. There are plenty of off-target throws in situations where he could have easily made on-target throws. So he has got some growing left to do. He still has a lackluster group of pass catchers to work with. So it's not like he's stepping into an offense with top shelf receivers. So yeah, I would start conservative here. Beyond that, we've got the goofy schedule of the week of playing in London. They're traveling Thursday night to get there. Gerard Mayo said too that, quote, there will be changes to the starting lineup for this game because he's looking to avoid penalties, looking to get his most dependable players out there. And I looked back over the penalties of the past 2 games, and it seems like 2 of the leading potential culprits here are offensive linemen. So maybe it's a good thing if they are replacing offensive linemen, but taking 2 guys out of that group or 1 guy or whatever it is, like, we don't even know what the changes are, but switching up that group could put better players on the field, but it could also make it harder for them to work together if another group has been working together to this point. We've seen in the past where even if you're improving the quality of offensive linemen, it doesn't necessarily improve the play of the offensive line. Ultimately, there's just so much what if here, and I don't know about it to keep me from actually trusting Drake Maye in any one quarterback situation.
Yeah, I mean, the O-line can't get worse. I don't know if swapping guys out is going to make it any better, but it can't get worse. You mentioned Mayo talking about making some lineup changes. I think we're going to see Jalen Polk not play as much in this game. Not that you should be considering for fantasy lineups anyways, but Mayo basically came out and said Polk just needs to play better, and he does. He was awful in that game against Houston. He hasn't had a good start to his rookie season. So I think that's one thing we'll see. We should mention with Maye that he reportedly had an MRI on one of his knees after Wednesday's practice. He was a full go in practice. Their OC, Alex Van Pelt, said he's not concerned about it. We'll see what he does on Thursday, but that's worth monitoring because, again, you do need that mobility from Maye if you're going to start him in fantasy lineups. The matchup's excellent against Jacksonville, so he has that going for him. And then we should talk too about Mario Douglas real quick, who is in our top 40 wide receivers this week. He's just easily been New England's best wide receiver this season. I hadn't even realized, I kind of overlooked the fact that he had seen 9 targets in 2 of his last 3 games heading into last week, saw another 9 targets in that game against Houston. So that's 9 targets in 3 of his last 4 games now. Appeared to have a pretty nice rapport with Drake Maye in that game against Houston. Again, the matchup's great against Jacksonville. So I think Mario Douglas, especially in full PPR leagues, is someone you can use as like a wide receiver 4 flex play this week.
Yeah, I think there's even room for him to move up our rankings a little bit because he's just outside the top 36 in 3D projection. If you look at his baseline projection, he's ahead of a number of the guys that are in front of him in the rankings. So, you factor everything in to get to that 3D projection and make those decisions. But there is certainly a chance that Demario Douglas, especially in a week where the Patriots are saying that they want to get out to a fast start, they want to rely on their most dependable players, like Demario Douglas has been one of the few dependable players on that team for his season and a half in the league so far.
Yeah, and Gerard Mayo said that they're going to consider using him in 2 wide receiver sets, which he is. I don't know if he's played at all in 2 wide receiver sets this season. He's only been out there in 3 wide receiver sets. That's kept his route rate like in the mid 70s. If that jumps up into the 80s and not like 90%, that can only help his weekly floor and ceiling.
Happy Pop Douglas week, everybody. If you want to see where he belongs in your lineup considerations, check your team intel page. That's going to factor in your specific league scoring settings. It's going to see who exactly is on your team, and it's going to tell you exactly who we would start in your lineup, in your situation this week. So check out Team Intel, check out Free Agent Finder if you're looking to find other options to stick in there this week or next week or beyond. And, check out all the other items we've been talking about throughout this show because all of it is there on draftsharks.com to be your unfair advantage.